before we jump right into the meat of this, Dan, let me ask you to let me take a step back and ask you to explain Spaceport to me. Like I really don't know what it is or what even what you're talking about, and let's break it down to its most basic components, because I think, and I do, we've had this conversation amongst ourselves and we talked. I think people are going to be a little bit surprised at one, what you're doing, and two, that there's really a lot of money potentially here for brand owners to exploit.
Yeah, certainly. So we've been around for a few years now, but a lot of people probably haven't heard of us or know exactly what we're doing. So happy to talk a bit about it. So at our core, we're a technology company and a technological services company. And what we're looking to do, and what we've had some great initial success in doing, is really kind of opening up new opportunities for IP owners, brands, creators to license and monetize their creations in areas that might otherwise not have been accessible to them. Either there might have been too much friction or lack of access or knowledge or opportunity. So trying to bring IP into areas that it might not have been before by kind of rethinking about the structure of licensing and how those licensing deals are obtained.
Mm-hmm. So let me follow up. We're talking about gaming, or are we talking about platforms? Are we talking about virtual reality, or all of the above?
Big picture, we can be talking about anything. But in terms of where we're operating now and where our first entries into the marketplace were, we're talking about digital worlds, digital environments, and primarily gaming environments. So, think of things like Roblox platforms and things of that nature.
Okay. So let me take it back even a step further into something where I'm a bit more comfortable. And I think maybe a lot of my audience might be, not that they don't know those other games, those other worlds, but when you're talking about like playing something like NFL Madden or UFC, and you get to create like a fighter or a receiver or whoever it may be, you get to kind of deck them out in an outfit of your choice, and that sort of, with different gloves or different trunks or things like that. It seemed to me when we were talking about this that was how I kind of understood what you guys are doing and offering, is the ability for players in these games or environments to customize characters, to customize their environment, and to import things that would otherwise be branded or copyrighted without getting in trouble, and with the copyright owner and the brand owner then realizing revenue stream because of it being used and deployed in the game. Is that a fair way to at least start to understand what Spaceport does?
I think that's a pretty accurate way to look at some of the stuff we're doing. Now, maybe in the individual game, like some like Madden, you know, maybe that's a little bit of a different angle. But I think what you're really getting at, Gene, is the concept of like user generated content. Like UGC has become a big thing within the video game world, and being able to purchase things for your character within the game. And we're kind of a lot of ways looking at microtransactions within some of these games, and being able to, really have unlimited customization options for different characters and different experiences. And absolutely, that's what we're looking at doing, is being able to create opportunities whereby, look, you might be a smaller developer, or you might be an IP looking to give you opportunities to get your creations, your IP into areas that you probably weren't thinking about. And if you were thinking about, you might not have an easy way to do it, or really any roadmap to do it, and trying to make that as, lightweight and as seamless as we possibly could for people.
Okay. And Jay, I know you're a fan of this whole genre, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? How does this translate from the user experience, the fan experience, and translate into the business and branding that really drives the revenue?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways to answer that question. I'm going to go from a personal and some recency bias. So I play Fortnite. I love Fortnite. That, I guess, it launched like in 2017. So that's been, we're pushing, a couple years away from a decade. That's a game that, tremendous fan engagement over a long period of time, which is next to impossible to do without completely rebooting and reskinning everything. So why is that environment so popular continuously? Well, one of it's how they use IP and the partnerships they use. So right now, the season has Godzilla in it, and it has before that it's got anime characters in it, and before that it's had Star Wars, and it's had the Avengers, and it's like it's constant. It's one environment, but it's incredibly dynamic and it's incredibly IP driven. By bringing new characters and new IP or people that things that you have nostalgia for into an environment and just constantly keeping it relevant. And I think that's a really good example of like why this matters, making it easy to bring, brands and IP into digital environments, because it makes them nostalgic and personal, and it makes a stickiness to where you can have the same environment, but it can be new like every few weeks by how you kind of like, I guess, roll the roulette wheel or spin the roulette wheel, if you will, to see what's the next IP that's going to be out. And sometimes it's current, sometimes it's nostalgic. I think that's really interesting because it's not easy to stay relevant in the gaming space for that long. The other thing that I think is really fascinating about, if you just look at kind of a common sense view into how does digital content, namely like on a YouTube, how does that become a thing? How do we get a Mr. Beast at the end of the day? Well, that's entirely fan driven, right? Someone didn't sit in a studio and say, hey, I got an idea. This guy, Mr. Beast, he's going to go do these weird challenges and everyone's going to love it. Like, that's kind of like one way that you kind of build around your IP, where you're kind of like, let's check some boxes and go very archetypal. But the other way that is really increasingly more popular in digital is that you put stuff out there until people start showing up. And it could be almost anything. And I do think that bringing that flexibility to how you deploy IP, Dan referred to it as user-generated content, I think is much more intellectually aligned with value creation in a digital environment than the, hey, come to us, license us, let's walk through all the paces and what we're going to do. We're going to do lunch boxes and backpacks and, whatever. Like, that's all very formulaic. And it's not that it doesn't work, but what it lacks is the ability to give people the chance to discover something that no one ever thought would be a thing that turns out to be the biggest thing ever. And I think that we see that constantly in digital environments. And then that's why I get excited about what Dan and his Spaceport team are doing, because they're actually much more aligned with how people and content gets discovered and popular in digital environments than the old way of doing it, which is let's just build it all and you'll come. Like, well, no, let's give the fans a chance to do it, and they're going to discover a bunch of amazing things that we never thought of.
So it's interesting that you say that, because the thing that popped in my head as you were talking is this really is very much a build it and they will come scenario, like to Field of Dreams on its most basic level. Okay, so here's the platform. People are going to come. They're going to start playing. And then what are they going to do with it? And I think all too often, brand owners, copyright owners, particularly, we're talking about for lack of a better way of describing it, the soft IP side, people will often want to stop you from doing what you're doing, and because you're infringing, rather than seeing it as an opportunity. And this in the real world, a lot of people probably in the audience are familiar with just how popular Comic-Con has become and still is over a long period of time. And there's always this, well, do you want to prevent your most loyal and dedicated fans from creating their own costume that's an homage to their favorite character or favorite superhero or favorite fantasy, whether it's an elf or an orc or whatever it may be, right? And say, hey, you can't do that. You have to buy the costume from us because you're infringing, which you probably technically are on some level, right? Or do you want to say, hey, that's really cool. Thank you. We really appreciate you being a fan. Please come and do that. Do more of it. Show up at Comic-Con, buy our stuff and so forth. And it becomes this really organic universe and culture. And I think that's what we're talking about doing for digital, right?
Yeah.
100%. And you look at, games that are out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Roblox or how that works. If you have kids, you probably are familiar with what's going on there. And, Gene, to your point, you have situations where it's not uncommon, it's not unheard of that, you know, unprofessional, shouldn't say unprofessional, but, young developers, they really enjoy this game. And, the tools are out there that they can create their own kind of experience within the game. That's basically what Roblox is in a lot of ways. It's a big marketplace, or like a big storefront where you can create your own individual games that sit within that. And we have situations where people have created these games that are based on these intellectual properties that they love. And these things are being created not from a position of malice or trying to do harm to these brands. They're saying, we love your stuff. We love your characters. We love the storylines you've created, and we want to bring them into this game and create upon them and make something really interesting that we'd really love. And for the most part, they wouldn't have access to those intellectual properties. They have no way about going in touch with the actual brand owner. If you're, looking to do something with Star Wars, to get involved with LucasArts or Disney or whatever it might be, it's like you don't have those paths, and trying to figure out how that licensing would be. Well, on Roblox, there have been many situations where these games that are, based upon IP, particularly anime type culture games, where these games have sprung up and they're doing millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And the people love it. I mean, the people playing these games, because these are all people from that community that love that intellectual property. They love those brands and stories. And the brand's kind of looking at it, and they have to make a decision, and they have to think about what they're going to do. And on one front, I think the natural or the traditional way to look at it would be, well, DMCA, we got to take this down. This isn't authorized. We can't do it. And in some cases, they've done that. They've taken that action. But we're actually seeing now that when brands do that, you do run the risk of all of a sudden you become the villain in the story, and that they're saying, hey, we weren't trying to harm you. We did this because we loved you. And the old saying, like, why can't we have nice things? Like, there was no alternative for me to create an official version of this. I wasn't doing this because I was trying to, maliciously, take from you. It wasn't as though we were in negotiations for a license and I didn't like the price. I backed out and then I created this. This came from a position of love. And when the company then effectively, in a lot of ways, bites the hand that feeds it, takes that away, we've seen with social media now, these communities have a lot of voice and there's a lot of coordination. We've seen, a lot of negative reaction where the company that, forces them to take it down. Well, it not necessarily looked great upon the people that are their primarily consumer of their IP. And with Spaceport, we're looking at it and saying, hey, there's other opportunities here. There's other avenues. What if you made licenses readily available? Or what if you communicated with some of these games? And let's think realistically, like, these games have huge reach. Some of these games, again, they're doing millions of dollars in revenue and stuff that kind of looks like, the original IP. It's not directly a one-off. You probably do have a case that there's some infringement going on, but it's not malicious infringement. Well, if you shut it down, all those people are going to be angry, and all that goodwill within that game effectively disappears. But what if there was a way that you could harness that? That instead of just having that game disappear, you could work with the owners of that game and say, hey, let's negotiate something. Let's have some sort of a license in place whereby, hey, now you can officially become part of the community. You can become, really under our umbrella. And instead of alienating all the, thousands, millions, tens of whatever it might be playing that game, you can now effectively work with them and then tell your fans, hey, look, there's opportunities. You want to officially work with us? You don't need to be one of the top development studios in the world. There's opportunities for you to work with us on a much smaller scale. And for us to take advantage of, instead of that game going away, let's have it just be converted into an official version of the game. I mean, these companies, they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars, to have professional studios develop this game. But in the end, the people doing the development don't really have an affinity or a love for the brand. So what gets created doesn't have that kind of magic that, fostered that joy in the first place and that connection. In these games, some of them do really well. I mean, there's dozens of examples of highly successful licensed IP games, but there's a lot of examples where they fail. So if you were to go and pay to have that game made for you, huge upfront costs, and not necessarily, probably the odds are against you to recreate that kind of magic. So why not turn it on its ear and work with your fan base and work with those people and kind of bring them all into the fold, which I think makes the community even stronger. Hey, we're actually part of the IP. We're part of the branding. And, of course, the opportunity is there for royalties and revenue, and that the brand can, while benefiting it from a PR and a marketing standpoint, also from a financial standpoint.
But I think there's an authenticity to that, Dan, that like you said, you alluded to, the systems of kind of monetization when it comes to IP, again, we'll use that word archetypal, like they know what works, right? It's brass tacks. Like, this is, you go through the paces and at the end of the day, you print the money. And there's nothing wrong with that fundamentally. But I do think that probably Web 1.0, 2.0 thinking, in digital environments doesn't seem to yield the winners the way that more of an open, collaborative, again, Dan used the word magic. I do think that's, I try to keep magic out of business as a general rule, but I don't let it in this time. But I think that's the key, right? Is that you don't really fully understand that fandom magic until it's for us, by us. And I do think, Roblox is full of things that went through the archetypes of like, let's build this, people are going to come, and they don't. There's a whole adage story about the fact that just doesn't happen. And so if you're in a digital environment and you're having Web 1.0, 2.0 conversations about if you build it, they'll come in a digital environment, there's a better than not chance that they just won't come. And you know where they come? They come to the fan created stuff. They come to the people who actually explore us bias. They understand it. And I think that just the reverse of the flow of the logic of IP and how you monetize and protect it, going from more a rigid, possibly punitive control factor to kind of an open, collaborative, user gen thing, it's clear that one of those things works better in digital environments as we move forward as humans in our interactions and entertainment in digital. And it is the one that's open and collaborative and has a much wider funnel of creativity that then gets refined down. Don't get me wrong, there's probably hundreds of thousands of things people do that won't be popular, but it's those little gems that no one could ever conceive that really lie at the end of the road for everybody who wants to flip the funnel, I guess, if you will, or flip the process of how you go about it.
Yeah, it's about democratization is what it really is in my mind. And hearing you guys talk about this reminds me of conversations I've had with some of the leading engineers from some of the top telecommunications companies in the world who were responsible for, and I have had the opportunity to interview some of the people that were responsible for 4G, for example, and then 5G. And one of the women who was one of the heads of one of the teams at one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world was talking about how, without 4G, you could never have had something like an Uber, for example, because 3G just wouldn't support what you need to do with the real-time maps and all that sort of thing to even make the thought of Uber possible. And because I asked her, I was like, well, what do you think? And I got the chance to talk to her as we were on the 4G, 5G cusp. I'm like, well, what do you expect is going to happen with 5G? And what she said is, I have no idea. She said, that's the real fun, exciting part is we've created this telecommunications ability and we know really cool stuff is going to happen. And we have no idea what it is. We can't predict how the user is ultimately going to see the ability to use the tool, but we know it's going to be stuff that we never thought about. We know it's going to be stuff that we could never have predicted. And that was for her and her team really super exciting. And I think that that's what you're talking about here is, like a lot of this, whether it's a part of the storytelling or a part of the creation of some characters or whatever it may be, you have no idea. You're really leveraging the collective creativity of your users, which does make it very special for them.
Hard to compete with. That collective creativity, you cannot compete with it. You just can't. It's not a real thought.
No, you can't. And not only that, I mean, it's just a good business, right? Because what do people always like their own ideas, and So you're going to make fans one at a time. And then if other people like what one fan has done, well, now you started creating like the snowball rolling downhill, I think, effect.
And you've got some really creative people that really care about these IP. A lot of love and energy would go into it. And if you give them the opportunity, you set, simple rules and guidelines, and you make, some licensing available to them. The opportunity to do it with the blessing of the company is a badge of honor. Like, that's something that most people we've spoken to and interacted with, they've really embraced. Like, wow, I can work with Toei Animation. I can do something officially with Toei Animation. That's incredible. Yeah, I want to sign up for that. I want to do that. I have to pay them royalties. No problem. No, of course they're going to get what their cut is. But I can create using their stuff and build upon their world. I want to be a part of it, and that's
let's
really where we are.
Let's take another step back here, because is it fair, Dan, to say that what Spaceport does on some level is sort of like an ASCAP or BMI, where you're creating this platform, you're creating the ability to have brands give you the rights, and then you're licensing the rights out to the end user, and you're sort of administering all of it with all the formulas and everything in the middle, so that there is a transaction of benefit to the owner and benefit to the individual creator, or how would you describe it?
I don't think that's unfair, but I think really what we're doing at this stage, and keep in mind we're still a smaller growing company, but we're working with IP owners. So we work with Toei Animation. That's probably our flagship brand right now. So if you know One Piece or Sailor Moon or some of their Dragon Ball Z, some of their really big animation projects, we've been working with them with some of their newer products, one called Hyper Galactic, based on like Monkey King mythology. But what we're doing with them is we're working with them to create a series of different license templates, lightweight license templates that they would say, okay, here are the ground rules for a license. Here's what would be available, and then making them available on our platform, on our protocol, so that then the developers and the people that would be interested in obtaining those licenses can very easily see them and sign them right on the platform, and have the ability to just get moving, rocking and rolling very quickly, very easily. So that's kind of where we are now, is we're working with the IP owners to create kind of a whole portfolio of different license templates that make things very clear and very easy, while the IP owner still kind of has control and knows what the ground rules are of that IP and what they're comfortable with and the boundaries there, and just making it out there and unleashing the world. And we're having a lot of really great traction, particularly with like very lightweight licenses. So if you think about it, to do a license deal, like, okay, you want to take one of the characters from the new movies, and they're these little monkeys that are really cute. Okay, well, you're going to do a deal to have those monkeys become backpacks that you can buy for your characters within Roblox, or shirts or hats or outfits, or there's really no limit to the creativity of what you could do. It would probably be hard to negotiate those licenses one-on-one. Well, if you have a template and you have a platform and you have ground rules, and it's basically a permissive license, as long as you follow the rules, all of a sudden it becomes real easy. And it's just, okay, I want to do this. Where do I sign up? And you can sign the license and you can get started pretty quickly.
And so Spaceport really is eliminating, to the greatest extent, transaction costs.
That's
That's
a real goal of what we're doing, is we're saying, okay, these transactions otherwise wouldn't take place, because the transaction cost of doing it, the transaction cost of giving licenses that are small scale to this many people would be, cost prohibitive. It would be really difficult to do. And to be able to reach out and even communicate with these people to get the license, it would be virtually impossible to do. So we're creating kind of a new way of thinking about licensing, in a lot of ways, thinking about it in terms of, okay, well, small transactions on the individual song level. Well, some new technology and some new thinking had to happen to make that possible. But once you did, okay, yeah, the transactions were less than $1 in many cases, but they add up to really big sums. And that's really what we're looking at here as well, is it can be, very small transactions, but for a dollar amount each one, but the volume of them can really add up to meaningful value for IP owners.
So, and are we talking about you're providing these, let's say, just like low or no transaction cost, lightweight licenses to developers, like like individuals who are developing something for gameplay, for example?
Yeah, I mean, really, it goes in scale. So, in working with Toei Animation, the kind of the threshold for doing a big, robust experience where you're creating an entire world based on their characters, that's a little bit not quite as lightweight a license, but still obtainable and still out there and still available to developers that otherwise wouldn't be able to get in contact with Toei Animation or the brand owner. But for the license to create just the user generated content, call it like the very small, the backpack, the shoes, the hat, those items, those are really freely available and out there, that anyone that's doing creative stuff, as long as you're willing to follow the pretty clear rules on there, you don't need to be an established big developer. You could be an individual or a brand new shop.
By the way, what are the interesting things about, the backpack, the T-shirt, and so recently Dan's team did something with the MFA of Boston, and they have the Hokusai Great Wave, which is a really famous painting, and they were trying to bring it into Roblox and do some interesting things, and they kind of went through all these iterations of stuff. And you want to know what one of the things that popped up, how kids wanted to use this that never would occur to an adult, is like they actually want to put their head through the painting and wear it around their neck with the frame running around Roblox, because that was like, where'd you get that? Like you take a famous painting and you like literally put your head through it with your face on there, and like nobody would come up with that. But you know what?
No.
The community came up with that, and guess what? Kids love it. And so it's like that's what's so wonderful about this, when you just really give communities a chance to discover and create as a partner of yours, responsibly. Something's going to fall out of it that sticks, and it's magical.
Yeah, we had no idea.
The developer makes money. The brand owner or copyright owner, in the case of a painting or sculpture, they would make money. And then the kids who want to see that and say, "Oh, I want that," then they're paying in to get that. And this is where I think also a lot of adults will start to lose. At least I will confess, when I see something has in-app or in-game purchases, I'm skeptical, and I know I shouldn't be, and it's a sign of my age. But because when we were kids, we bought the game and you could play it as much as you want, But these in-app purchases and in-game purchases, that's really where the revenue is, and you're enabling this creativity, this whole marketplace to exist because of that phenomenon. Correct?
Absolutely. And that's really, I think, where the whole industry is going, is that there is no game. It's all online. It's all a license to use it and operate. And pretty much everything is moving towards those in-game or those transactions within the actual application itself.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Speaking of the MFA, that was a real interesting thing that happened. But also talking with them, we found that I think there's something special about giving parents the opportunity of, okay, now we've got, you look at some of the best-selling T-shirts that they have or the best-selling apparel that they have in their gift shop. Well, we can make digital clones of that. We've been calling it digital twin. And okay, yeah, you can get your kid a T-shirt from the Museum of Fine Arts, and the kid might open that up as a holiday gift or as a birthday gift. Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, that's a T-shirt. That's really nice. But what we can do is we can make a digital twin of that T-shirt, and we can say, oh, but wait, there's more. I'm not just giving you the T-shirt. You actually have the digital twin of that T-shirt as part of the purchase as well. And your character and your avatar in the game can be wearing the exact same T-shirt that you are wearing while you play the game. And that's kind of, we've gotten a lot of connection and a lot of push through to make that happen. And just a lot of interesting things that you can do to, okay, now not only are you monetizing that new digital purchase that didn't exist before, but you're also linking it with a real world purchase that maybe linking the two drives more sales there. And we're starting to see that that's happening.
You went full phygital, like with the full
that's digital twin or phygital. Yeah, those are the two terms that have been thrown around.
When I think of when you said that, I was like, well, that's phygital.
So this is just fascinating because it really requires brands to look at things in a different way. And again, I think I already said this, but you don't want to make the people who are your biggest fans infringers. What you want to do is you want to work with them to make essentially to make money off of what they're doing. And a lot of these people would probably do it anyway if they were allowed to do it within the universe structure anyway. And this isn't not. I mean, it seems to me like this is just win-win, but it does require brand owners to fundamentally, in some ways, shift their thinking and say, not everybody that wants to do these types of things is nefarious. They're
Right.
not trying to rip us off.
Right. Most of these things aren't done out of a position of malice or greed. It's done, they don't know. In a lot of cases, it's ignorance or lack of opportunity or lack of alternative. I think that if most fans of things given the choice between an officially licensed something and something that isn't officially licensed, probably would veer towards the officially licensed thing. But if there is no officially licensed thing available, there is no alternative. Well, then what really are your options?
Did you
So
guys ever follow the story of how the Doritos Locos Taco Bell taco was created? You ever heard
N-
that story?
let's
No,
fill
no.
everyone in.
Well, like, so first, apparently, like, they got the lawyers together to figure out, like, because the CEOs wanted to do it, and for like 2 years, they couldn't get the lawyers on the same page, like how to do it, right? Which is, to me, a representative of the challenges of a rigid IP system, right? No one wants to cross-pollinate this because, God forbid, like someone, gets, 49 instead of 51% of the benefit in that exchange, right? So it lingered for 2 years. They couldn't get it done. And finally, you know how they got it done? The CEOs actually had a handshake agreement that said, we're going to create this Doritos Locos Taco Bell taco, which goes on to sell billions and become one of the most popular items on their menu, co-branding Doritos and Taco Bell on a really highly successful product. But like, that just goes to show you is if you just let the guardrails down a little bit, like the world wants, these hybrids, they want to cross-pollinate, they want to create, these things will be popular, right? When you bring things together that have never been done before, I just think that, again, there's some really interesting stuff that right now the legal frameworks get in the way of. And I think when I look at Spaceport, I just see that they're kind of like releasing some of that legal framework pressure and allowing the system to kind of go out there and reimagine IP. And I'm sure lots of wonderful things will come of it.
That's
Hopefully, maybe even better
you want
version.
to go.
Yeah, maybe even a better Doritos Locos taco because those are quite delicious.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting. When I was in law school, I had the great good fortune to have as a professor Carl Jorda, who was one of the deans of licensing, and he did everything. He's a different generation than we are. He'd be sort of like our grandfather's age, or maybe even a little bit older. But and I got an opportunity to meet him, and one of the things he always preached about was don't be a red light lawyer. Be a green light lawyer. Don't get in the way of deals. Help deals get done. Because as it turns out, the CEO often has already decided it's going to happen. So you saying, no, we can't do this. No, you can't do this. All it's going to do is it's going to, one, marginalize you. And two, it's going to wind up with the company getting a deal that's less protective. And you can't nail down everything. You have to do some things. Because if you tried to kneel down, ask every last possibility, nobody would ever sign that deal. It'd be so long. So you have to say yes. You have to be willing to say yes, and then just make sure you're protected to the extent that you can be. And I think it all does also focus on the fact that like you can't, if you're constantly thinking the other side is there to screw you, then you're protecting so much that you're never going to get anything done. If you I always tell people, how do you hold a bird? Okay, you can't hold a bird like this, because if you hold a bird like this, the bird is going to try and get away. But if you hold a bird like that, the bird may just sit in your hand. So IP is a lot the same way. If you try and hold it like this, it wants to get out, and people want to break in and get it. And one of the stories that have been popping in and out of my head as we've had this conversation is, earlier in my career, I knew an attorney. I won't name the band, but they were one of the largest hair bands of the 80s. And he represented them. and actually she represented them, and she knew I would do internet and trademarks, IP stuff, and they had a fan who had bought. It turned out to be a fan. Somebody had bought the domain name before they could, and person never sent a demand. It was not a cyber squatting thing where they were going to give me $1 million and I'll give you your name. It was just, he bought it. This fan bought it, and they intended to do fan stuff with it. They were a big fan. So I said, the first thing you got to do is let's not assume that this person is a nefarious actor until after we talk to the buyer, and then we can maybe ultimately come to that conclusion. And then because that's a different path. I said, but let's just talk to the person and find out why did they do this and what do they want? And I said, because I suspect you may be able to get out of this. And I forget why I suspected this, but I predicted it accurately. I said, I suspect this person is a fan. And I suspect that if you're willing to give them a signed guitar, you'll get the domain name for nothing else. And the band will wind up getting great PR. Give them a signed guitar and 2 tickets to a concert, and and it could be a PR stunt event and everything. And lo and behold, wind up being a fan. The guy was thrilled. Are you kidding? Yes, give me a signed guitar, and I get 2 tickets to a concert. And it was a win for them. The band was not like viewed as like Metallica, which is just overly restrictive and almost doesn't like their fans, it seems at times, and it was a great story, great PR story. They got the name for much cheaper, much, much cheaper than if we had gone all out. We would have been able to get it, obviously, because they owned the name. It was who they were. But you go that path, and it's like the lawyers get paid, the fees of the courts get paid, it drags out for years. And all this person was a fan.
Yeah.
And it's a
And
lesson.
if it happened today with social media marketing, how much would a campaign of the goodwill that you're going to get that's going to be spread across, how much would that have been worth as well?
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's what
Absolutely.
we're talking about. It's punishing your fans versus embracing your fans in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
And it's in a way, reason I like it is it's not by saying, okay, just do whatever we want with our creation or our brand or our, image or likeness or whatever it is. There's got to be some responsibility. It's like, okay, you can't do anything that's
Right.
going to hold the brand in ill repute. But those types of terms are easy to add, and they can be very, very lightweight because most people don't want to violate them. And if you do get somebody who wants to violate them, there won't be any problem finding a judge who says, nah, that's across the line.
Right. And for the most part, these are communities of people that care and love the IP and wouldn't do something like that and wouldn't support it. So
Right.
that really wasn't the issue. That
Mhm.
people and said, okay, we need to put those baseline protections in there, but as of yet, we haven't had to enforce them once. Everyone has been really happy to do it, and in some cases, giving brands the opportunity, if there's a story behind certain characters, particularly newer characters, exposing them to that story and saying, okay, well, this is kind of the context in which this character behaves. So for some of the people that are developing the more robust worlds and bigger games around the IP, you get exposure to some of that too, which makes them feel, hey, people don't have this yet. I'm creating like the original impressions of some of these characters and some of their stories and what it's going to be. And it's, they view it as a really great opportunity. And so like really a responsibility in some cases.
Yeah. The guy who, George Martin, Game of Thrones, could have used something like this before he went off and ruined the whole universe by letting Brandon become the emperor. And as soon as that happens, as soon as you see that, your whole fan base is like, what did you do? Oh my God, I can't believe you. Whereas if you had let the fans write the ending of that particular the franchise, they were already ready to do 3 or 4 spin-offs, and so many of those things just died on the vine because they didn't give the fans what they wanted.
Hey, if you want another crack at the apple and you're listening, we're here to give you in the gaming world. We got another crack at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you spending some time with us here today. But before I let you go, I'd like to get both of you your final thoughts. What do you want people to hear, to take away, to understand based on not only this conversation, but what's really going on out in the marketplace? Jay, we'll start with you, and Dan, I'll give you the final word.
I think my final thought is really kind of the curiosity of when the winds will change and just the kind of overall ethos of how you manage a brand or IP, from one that maybe protects and stifles to one that kind of enables, its fans, or enables it to maybe take on a new life or new value. I'm really curious of how long it's going to take for that shift to happen. I've been in online conversations about that. I think there's a lot of people who are like younger generations who are ready for that to shift now. But is it going to take 2 decades before, all the people who were trained the old way, to move through the system and get out of the way? Who knows? So that's kind of like my fascination, is because I do think that there's a world of creativity waiting on the other side of that shift. And I just hope that the people who stand in the way of it figure out that they're not really enabling it. But other than that, my final thought is just like, these digital environments, and we move into Web3, and it's just so many layers and interfaces of technology, and the stuff that kind of makes it all go is the IP and the love and of those brands and the nostalgia for those things. They've got a lot of places to go, and I just hope that people are able to enable them to go there without, kind of standing in the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks a lot, Jay. Appreciate it. And Dan, the final word goes to you.
Sure. And I'll say, Jay, you mentioned some of the Web3 stuff. And one other thing, we'll have to probably if we have the chance to talk again, that, some of our technology, we're all based on blockchain and Web3, and some of the issues with licensing that, traditionally exist, a lot of those can go away using some of these Web3 and blockchain technologies. If you can imagine that royalty payouts on some of these deals could be instantaneous instead of waiting for 30 days from an end of a quarter and worrying about whether or not there's visibility on the transactions. While in a blockchain environment, as these digital transactions move onto blockchains and they become kind of these digital transactions, well, you have immediate visibility of all of it, and you can get paid immediately and eliminate all of some of the major issues that traditionally exist within licensing. So maybe for another conversation, but in general, I think Jay hit it right, is that I think brands have an opportunity to kind of shift their focus and shift the thinking of how they're controlling their IP and looking at it as a more permissive way, and take advantage of the creativity of your fan base, take advantage of the people that care most about your IP, and seeing what opportunities are out there. Like, you don't need to take giant chasm leaps. You can, expose some small elements of your IP and see what's out there and see what you can do. And, I think in the era we're in now, treating your fans as infringers or as nefarious as they try to interface and win their IP, I think giving them some education and giving them some guide rules and giving them some license and some opportunity, I think opens up a ton of new opportunities and a ton of doors, and just brings your IP into areas that you otherwise wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been great. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.